Grasswalker, and I'm here today to talk to you about something that's very controversial, at least from the Reddit comments and PMs I've gone when I've talked about this in the past. And let's just get some music on here and pull up my notes, and let's just sit down and enjoy ourselves for however long this video goes. This exists purely to inspire you to think about your value as a player and your value as a DM. If you're a DM, your value as a DM, the value of your players, all this stuff. But also, what does it actually mean that you have different values? And you do. So let's begin by analysing the players. As a player, you come into a game at the discretion of a DM. He allows you to join, and you make a character. One of 4, one of 5, one of 6 characters. You make up the party, which is a small part of the world. It is a large part of the story because it's very centered around you, but in terms of the game, the party is a small thing because there are 5 players, and the time is split fairly evenly between the two, but the DM will be setting the scene. The DM makes the quests. The DM makes and balances the combat against what opponents he chooses. The DM also organizes things out of character. Who joins the game? Who's kicked from the game for bad behavior? When you play the game? Who's supposed to bring snacks? Where the location of the game will be? Is it on Roll20? Is it on a different platform? I don't actually know of any others. The DM is valued very highly, and you can tell this because if a game ends, it's usually because the DM has said the game has ended, or because the DM has left or stopped running the game. If the DM decides not to come every week for 5 weeks, that game is dead. Whether or not the players are there, whether or not the players want to play, no matter how much the players love the game and want it to continue, if the DM isn't there, the game is over. However, if one player leaves, that's almost nothing. You make a post on Reddit LFG, Roll20 LFG, or the Discord server LFG on the D&D Plaza, any of these places, and you can have a replacement 5 minutes. Or, if you care about the value of the replacement, you can see what comes back and decide in a bit of a longer period of time. However, the point stands that if the DM leaves, the game is probably over, unless a player becomes the DM and makes their own game. However, if one player leaves, nothing. If every single player leaves, the whole party, every player leaves, the DM starts fresh, and he finds new players, and it's a mild inconvenience. It sucks. Don't get me wrong, it sucks. I can't even imagine how bad it would be to lose an entire party of players, but that's because it'd be annoying to replace them. It's not because it ends the game, it's because I then have to basically start the whole adventure again and find new people to join it, and that's a couple days job. It's a couple hours to put the posts up in the different places, and a couple hours to do interviews and read applications. But by no means have you ended the game. If every player goes on strike, that's it. It means nothing. But if the DM goes on strike or leaves, it means everything. So with that food for thought, you might be sitting there going, "But Grasswalker, I'm a player. I'm not worthless, am I?" Unfortunately, the short answer is yeah, you're worthless as a player. Because you can be easily replaced, quickly, by somebody better than you who's willing to pay money. So, I'm going to begin with a story. You can already tell I've betrayed my notes because I'm starting on the third story. When I ran my game, a couple of players left and I was a bit bummed out. And I looked for replacements. I posted on Reddit, Roll20, and not here, but I would have posted here otherwise. And I waited 5 days to see who wanted to join my game. 612 people wanted to join my game. I had 1 empty slot. Maybe 2, I don't remember. But the point is, a couple of people left my game, let's say 2. I needed 2 people, I had 600 people wanted to join. So I had to decide, how am I going to decide who is allowed in my game? Because I can't take everybody. So I asked them for money. I said, hey, you know what? If I am in such demand as a DM, a good DM, I'm going to ask, what are you willing to pay to join my game? 205 people willing to pay me money to play in my game. ranging from $5 a session to $50 a session. I valued how good of a player I felt that they were, and how well they fit the current party, and how well they carried themselves as a human being, and contrasted it with the amount of money they were willing to give me, because I'm a university student who needs to eat. And I took some players that were going to pay me. And slowly but surely, the players that weren't committed, that weren't paying me money, that didn't care about the game, flaked away. Because they weren't involved, they weren't committed. They had, the only tie they had to the game was the fact that they wanted to be in the game. The people that were paying me had a deeper tie, because they're invested, they've been paying, they've made this big character, all this stuff. But the point is, if you need a new player, and you're sat there behind the screen, Grasswalker, I'm not valueless as a player, you do bring good stuff to the table. Players, as a whole, have value. But there are so many of them that you, no matter how good you think you are, even if you're Scanlan from Critical Role, you're that good of a player, someone is just as good as you, and willing to pay me money to let me DM for them. So I'll go on to another story, because I'm sure that didn't go down well. And this is a story from a perspective of when you don't know your value. I was in a game, a desert-themed survival campaign, ran by a guy called Akomo. He grabbed a couple of players that were willing to join. It felt like pretty much the first people to respond to the post. Very happy to have them. He was a very excitable DM. He was really proud of his world and stuff. And he asked us to roll for stats, which is immediately an odd thing, because point buy, giving a raise, stuff like this lets all the players be balanced. But regardless of any of that discussion, that's for another video someday. We rolled for stats, and everyone in the game opened up the chat and went /roll 4d6 drop 1, and they repeated this 4 times, because that's how you roll stats to drop dice and do it legitimately. One player, I don't remember his name, went /roll 18, or /roll 18, that's it, /roll 18, /roll 17, and he pretended as though he rolled 5 18s and 1 17, a comical array at best. I questioned him, hey, it looks like you've cheated. Do you mind rolling real stats? It doesn't seem fair on the party to be grouped with somebody that's cheated their stats. And the player replied, but how did I get to 17 if I cheated? To which I asked the DM, hey, this player is worthless garbage. He's a cheater, a liar, a manipulator. He doesn't care about the game balance. He doesn't care about good story moments for the party. This guy just wants a power trip to be the best. He's playing Variant Human Paladin, looking to do some cheesy infinite crit build with Tunnel Fighter and a million reactions, and he's bullshitted 18 in every stat. This guy's not worth having in your game. The value of this player is actually a detriment on the game. This player has negative value. Kicking him and replacing him with nobody, and we just playing as 3, would be better than having him in the game. And the DM said, okay, but I can't kick a player. I need them. And it's like, yeah, you need players, you do. But you need good players. You don't want this. You don't want this guy. He's awful. Sure enough, DM keeps him in the game, lets him have his array of all 18s, and it comes to session 0, where we're planning our backstories, and the guy no-shows. The guy with all 18s that's cheated his perfect hand, everything he could possibly want has been given to him on a platter, undeservedly. Session 0, he doesn't come, and he doesn't warn us before he comes, and he doesn't apologize afterwards. He just posts something like, oh, got busy. That's it. No apology, no pre-warning, no anything. This is... I'm like basically begging Akomo at this point. This player is beyond worthless. This man has negative value. If you don't kick this person, he's gonna poison the game. He is awful. And Akomo kept him. And eventually, the guy who had all 18s, session 1 comes around, and he no-shows again. At this point, he's 0 for 2. He cheats, he lies, he steals, he does everything possibly wrong, he no-shows every session. This man isn't even a player of the game. and then at the end of session 1, he leaves of his own accord, he quits the Discord server. But for me, this story isn't about how awful that player was. It's about how unaware the DM was of his value. He could have made a post on LFG and found an infinitely better player that was willing to give him money to run that, and instead he settled for the worst possible player you could get, who wasn't giving him money and was causing problems for the group and had a negative impact on the game. So this calls into question, player value varies. Every DM needs players, and every DM wants good players. So players do have value, they must have some value, or else the Akomo Garbage Paladin player would be an equal value player to my good friend Luna, who's an awesome player. But that's not true, so some players have more value than others. And players as a whole have to have a little bit of it because they're still in the game. They make up the party makes up an okay portion of the game. So what value do players have, and how much does a DM have to coddle them, or appeal to them, or tolerate them? If you do something wrong as a player, how many strikes should you get before you're kicked and replaced with somebody better that's giving money? How many people should be in a game that aren't paying when out there are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people willing to pay? It's a strange one, a very strange one. And I just want you to think about it. I'm not going to tell you the right answer. I'm just going to tell you stuff about what I think and stories I've experienced. And it's up to you to figure out how you feel about that. My final story is about League of Legends guy, as I've called him. I never remember the name of the bad people, which is funny. I remember the name of the DM, and I remember the game the garbage player was playing. But I was in a game ran by this really nice Brazilian guy, I don't remember his name, and it was his first time DMing. He has no idea the value he has as a DM, because it's his first time playing D&D, and it's his first time deciding that he ever wants to do anything. So unlike Akomo the veteran, who's DM'd a bit before and has a bit more value as a DM, this guy's brand new, he doesn't know his value, and he also doesn't have as much value because he's a brand new DM. He barely knows how to roll initiative, he barely knows the class rules, he barely knows anything, but he still has more value than any of the players, which is a strange predicament. So the session comes around, and I'm messaged from my friend. I'm not even in this game at this point. I'm messaged by my friend, and she says, the DM's really upset. Nobody's come to the first session except me and, like, one other. Out of the 6 players he recruited, only 2 have showed up. And the DM was apologizing to the other players. He was saying, oh, I'm sorry I wasn't good enough for you, player. What can I do to make sure you come next week? What did I do wrong? And this is precious, because this is a brand new DM who doesn't realize these players are worthless. He's a brand new DM who doesn't realize he has the value, and he's striving to improve, and I love that quality in somebody. He's asking them what he did wrong so they'll come next week, but the thing is, the thing he did wrong is he let them in the game. He didn't vet the players hard enough. He didn't do a thorough enough recruitment process with voice interviews. The mistake he made was caring what worthless people thought, and I think that's a problem a lot of people have, especially DMs, who feel like the players in their game have more value than the players that aren't in their game, that would want to be in their game if they opened recruiting. So this awesome Brazilian DM person keeps every single one of these players that didn't warn him they weren't coming to the session, didn't make a character in preparation for the session, and no-showed the session. He kept them. This was his mistake. He didn't kick them and find better people. But the next week rolls around, and my friend messages me again. No one showed up again. The DM is really upset, he feels really bad, and I can tell that it's getting to him. And I said, you know what? It's 2 AM in England, but this DM deserves better. Fuck it. Tell him, invite me to the game, and I'll just rock up, I'll make a character in 2 minutes, and I'll just play. I won't be good. I promise you I won't be good, because I'm making a character in 2 minutes, but I'll be there. It'll be a party of 3. D&D can be played very easily with 3 people. It doesn't necessarily need 6, it doesn't necessarily need any number in particular, but 3 is a fine number to run a game in. So I rock up and I play the session, and it's good fun, and we have fun, and the DM's like, man, can you join full time? I'm like, no, this game starts at 3 in the morning and ends at 7 in the morning. And he's like, oh, that sucks, that's a shame, but if you ever want to guest star again, if your body clock's ever messed up enough, please come back. And I'm like, you know what, I will. But the problem is, for this DM, is that he had these worthless players, and he refused to learn, well, not refused to learn, but he didn't know, he didn't have the experience to know, as a DM, I have the value. This player that hasn't made a character in preparation for the game should already be kicked. This player that no-shows a session without warning should be kicked. Now, you can build up a reputation. You can go to session 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you can no-show session 5, and the DM might be like, hey, why did you do that? And you give them enough of an excuse, they might let it slide. But if you no-show session 1, you've established that 100% of the time at this point, you've missed every session. You haven't warned us, you're worthless. Like, if your first impression is that bad when you're trying to impress, just kick that person. I think so many DMs are reluctant to kick players that are worthless. I think everyone should sit down and they should introspect about their value and what they bring to the game. Are you a good player? Are you a bad player? Are you an average player? Are you a good DM? Are you an average DM? Are you an average DM that lacks experience? Are you a good DM with lots of experience? There are different categories and different factors that will raise or lower your value. Are you an amazing player who, due to their work, is inconsistent in attendance? That will raise or lower your value depending on different factors. Are you an awesome player at story, but a bad player at combat? In which case, maybe find a story-themed game where your badness in combat doesn't matter. Are you an awful player that can play combat like Warhammer, like a full-on war game that's tactically minded, World of Warcraft raid style, and you can nail it? Maybe don't find a roleplay game. Maybe find a war game that fits you, or even a D&D campaign, potentially in 4th edition or 5th edition, that's just very tactically minded. Look at your strengths and weaknesses as a player and try and line them up with the DM. Are you, for example, are you a good player that has bad attendance but good roleplay, decent combat, awful character voices, bad backstories? Figure out all of your different values on all of the different metrics that you can think of and sort of get a feel for yourself, being aware that you're biased towards yourself. What am I worth? And then think to yourself, what are the other players? Well, maybe not if you're a player, don't think what the other players are worth, that's going to ask for problems. But think, what am I worth? What's the DM worth? Or if you're the DM, think, what am I worth? What are each player worth? And think, is it better for the game for me to be in it? Is it better for the game for this player to be in it? If you have this guy in the Akomo game openly cheating, unapologetic, denying that he cheated despite the clear evidence of just printing the number 18, who doesn't show up to sessions, every player in that game and the DM should point at that guy and go, unworthy. And the DM should be believing in themselves enough to know that they have the value to say, you didn't show me respect, I don't need to show you respect, you're out, I could replace you like that. Every DM in the back of their mind should always be thinking, I could replace you like that. Are you worth it? Why are you in this game? When you've applied to join this game, what makes you better than the hundreds of people that could be in this game instead? And don't get a chip on your shoulder. Don't be over-cocky and overzealous, and don't actively berate your players on how worthless they are. Just establish this relationship where no one is mistreating the other or misrespecting the other. I don't even think that's a word, but I wish it was. Just think about what you're worth and what you're willing to tolerate. So another example I didn't even write down, I've actually pretty much abandoned my notes at this point. I joined a game and I was a bad player. Not because I'm a bad player, but because I didn't fit the game. I didn't like how it was ran, I didn't enjoy the sessions, I wasn't contributing as much as I felt I could as a player, and I acknowledged, this game isn't for me. So I left, I kicked myself. Not that that's how that works, but if you're in a game that you don't like, or you don't enjoy, or you hate the other players, or the DM's awful and he keeps mistreating you, maybe that game isn't for you. Maybe the value of that game, the value of those players, the value of that DM isn't high enough for you, or is too high for you, or is just different to you. If everyone else does character voices and you don't, and you're a bit anxious about it and you would never ever do that, but they expect it and demand it's a minimum expectation, sure, you could just stay in that game and have the same arguments and have the same problems and keep hitting your head against the same issues, or you could realize, actually, as a player, I have some value. This game doesn't have the value to me, so I'm leaving this game. And just like how I, as a DM, can post my game here and get 600 replies, most of which are willing to pay me money to run the game, you as a player can go into these subreddits, you can find the games, and you can apply and you can go, hey, DM, you need players. You need 5 players? I'll be one of your players. I'll be a good player. I'll be a great player. I'll do my best. These are what I've got. These are what I bring to the table. This is my sort of play style. Don't lie to people. Don't make things up, because if you claim yourself to be an avid role player when you hate roleplay, and DM's like, ooh, avid role player, he fits this game, invites you to the game, and the game is full of avid role players that roleplay and you hate roleplay, you've made your own problem. So never lie when applying to a game. I've had people lie to me about their experience in D&D, and I'm so confused by it, because immediately I can tell. Like, if you're asking me for help to build your character and, like, how do I roll stats, stuff like this, I can tell that you're not an experienced player. Is that a problem? No, the problem is that you lied and said you had 10 years experience, and you've failed the expectations. I love having new players, I love having old players, I love having middle players. I don't care about how long you've been playing, personally. I just don't want you to lie about it. So, by thinking that you're meeting an expectation that you don't, and thinking that you're raising your value by lying about how experienced you are, you're actually lowering your value by tagging yourself as a liar. There's a lot of things to just think about, and I hope that this video helps you guys think about that. And if you're in a game where someone, like the Akomo guy, just has a cheater in the game who's not shown up to sessions, is worthless, I feel like this is a good video to send them, or a good point to bring up, that hey, is this guy worth the opportunity cost of not having somebody else? If you have a game like the Brazilian DM, I actually never even mentioned the League of Legends bit, but the guys that were skipping the sessions were on Discord tagged as playing League of Legends. They just gave 0 shits about the game. It's not like they got hit by a car or something. They were actively dodging the session. They left the game of their own accord. Why didn't they leave if they didn't want to be in it? Why didn't the DM kick them if they didn't want to be in it? Why do either of these parties think that their values aren't what they are? As a player, you have little value, but you have value. You have enough value that when compared to other players, the DM might think you have more value. Not because you're better, but because you might have specific skills. If I'm a new DM, and I'm looking for players to help me DM, I might look for seasoned DMs. Which, if I'm a seasoned DM, and I'm looking for new players to experience D&D for the first time and have fun, I might not want to recruit seasoned DMs, because they might boss me around, they might get antsy about things that I do, they might be like, actually, that's not how the cover rule works, and then I have to be like, actually, my game it is. If you weren't a DM, this wouldn't have happened. Like, if you weren't such a seasoned DM, you wouldn't be trying to correct me on what's not wrong. I'm the DM, sit back, be a player, don't worry about it. Sometimes it's easier to just avoid that and just recruit players or new players. But whatever it is, everybody has a value. What's yours?